Hello! This video will discuss important things and information you need to know before we begin to understand the novel Dear Mr. Kilmer. Check it out.
My dear viewers, I really appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel by clicking that subscribe button, and also if you could give this video a like by hitting that like button. And if you feel that this video is useful and helpful for you, then feel free to share it with your friend by clicking that share button there.
In this video, we will first learn about who is Mr. Kilmer. And then, we will look at the settings used in this video and why they are important. Next, we will look at the other setting, which is World War I, and how it affects the plot of this novel. And then we also will learn about the real meaning of the HUNS, and finally about what are Liberty Bonds. So, who is Mr. Kilmer? For your information, Mr. Kilmer is a real person. He is not a fictional character. Mr. Kilmer is a real person used in this novel with fictional plot. So Mr. Kilmer is a real person. He is a poet. His full name is Alfred Joyce Kilmer. And in this novel, we know that his name is Joyce Kilmer. So his full name is Alfred Joyce Kilmer. He is an American writer and poet, and mainly remembered for his short poem Trees. Yes, the one we have read in the novel itself. And he died on July 30, 1918 at Marne, France. So the death of Mr. Kilmer in the novel is the real thing. That's basically how he died in real life. And here is the different faces of Mr. Kilmer. The one on the left, look at how handsome and young he is. And the one on the right is when he became a surgeon, when he, Sergeant Joyce Kilmer, when he joined the army. I don't know about you, but I personally really love this novel. For me, Dear Mr. Kilmer is the one novel for SPM that I really enjoy reading and I really love the content. Why? Here, I tell you why. The first reason is because novel is a fiction, cerita rekaan semata-mata. However, it uses real life character, which is our Mr. Kilmer, and real events, such as World War I and related events, which we will discuss later. And this is a simple novel. Maybe to some of you it sounds complicated, but no, I don't think so. I think the content of this novel is quite easy and straightforward. But what makes the novel seem a bit difficult is because it highlights heavy themes. Tema untuk novel ini agak berat. Why? The themes are prejudice and discrimination. This is something dark and heavy, something not many novel would talk about. But other than that, the other themes such as bravery, standing up for what is right, determination, those are common themes that can be found in other novels. But prejudice and discrimination, put together with war, peperangan, that's heavy. Now, shall we look at the settings? As we all know, settings can be divided into setting of time, latar masa, setting of place, latar tempat, and also setting of society, latar masyarakat. So when this novel, when the story, the events, peristiwa-peristiwa in this novel actually happen, It happened between 1917 and 1918, which is during World War One. Don't worry, we will cover this later. And then the next one is the place. The whole thing that happened in the novel, other than some information about Mr. Kilmer, everything else happened in a small town in Iowa, America, and the place is called Turtle Lake. All right, remember this, the name of the place. You should not get it wrong. Okay, Turtle Lake. And finally, we look at the setting of society, the society. So, people in Turtle Lake, most of them are farmers. And remember, farmers usually come from lower middle class, which means that they are not rich. They are, well, pretty much poor and, lacking in education. We will cover this further, don't worry. And this is an example of the countryside. Remember I said earlier Turtle Lake is a small town where farmers live? So farmers live in countryside. In America, farmers live in countryside. And this is how countryside look. If you were a fan of Smallville, a TV show about Superman, then the whole setting was in a countryside, right? So this is example of a countryside. So this is what the farmers do for a living. They raise cattle, right? Raise cattle, haiwan-haiwan peliharaan, haiwan-haiwan berkaki empat, seperti lembu, kambing, babi, right? Pigs, goats, cows, right? And in this picture, we can see a man lifting hay, right? Lifting hay. So hay adalah jerami. So these are the things that farmers do, right? Just some photos to give you the visual image of how countryside look like. Unlike Bahasa Melayu papers where settings are asked in SPM English novels have never asked anything about settings. However, settings is as important as other things in a novel because settings reveal much information that helps us to understand the novel, the plot itself. And in Dear Mr. Kilmer case, right, in the case of Dear Mr. Kilmer, it helps us to understand a few things. Two things particularly. The first one is why Richard is called SISSY. But first, we need to look at gender roles. What is gender roles? Gender roles, if we translate to BM, it's peranan jantina. Sounds weird, huh? But it means that what a woman should do and what a man should do. So it's basically men versus women. However, these days we have more than two genders. But I personally still believe and think that genders are only between men and women. All other weird genders are not genders. Well, sorry, please don't bash me. That's just my traditional and conservative opinion. Right? So, in what way do we compare the two genders in terms of behavior, attire, and a few other things? Well, you may not be able to relate as much probably because nowadays men and women, there are not much difference. I mean, women can do what men can do, and men can also do what women do. In fact, in terms of attire, you go to the mall, you might see a beautiful figure, but then when that person turns around, it might not be a woman as you expected. So, not much to see from there. However, if we look at the setting of this novel, it happened between 1917 and 1918, which means it is in the early 1900. Do you remember Titanic? Do you remember how the people in the movie wears? How the people in the movie wear their attire? Let's look. Yeah, they look like this. When you look at this picture, tell me, can you tell which one is a man and which one is a woman? Obviously, the one on the left is a man because he's wearing what we call man attire, pakaian lelaki, right? Pakai topi, and then he has a bow tie, and then he has his blazer, his suit, and then that woman, just look at her gorgeous hat. I don't know what it is called, but that looks so gorgeous. And then just look at her chest. She has that something that looks like a flower made of ribbons. So by looking at this picture, we can already tell which one is a man, which one is a woman. Though today, you might have some trouble differentiating between the two. But gender roles does not only revolve around the look. It also about what they do. This is very important. So let's have a look. Okay, back then in the early 1900s, men were expected to be more active and outspoken. They are more physical. So because they are more physical, they do heavy and rough works such as hunting, wood cutting, farming, all those heavy stuffs. And they are also expected to live and active in sports, such as to live active and manly activities, such as sports, hunting, and farming. And they usually have better opportunity at education. Women are the opposite of this. They are supposed to be timid and soft-spoken. Kena lemah lembut, ayu. And then they should do feminine works such as cooking, doing laundry, doing house chores. Right? Men are not, men back then, they were not supposed to do all this. And then, since men love physical activities, women should love something which are more art, something finer, yang lebih halus. Because women are pretty, so they are supposed to love finer things. So finer things will include arts such as poetry and also sewing, menjahit, puisi, right? But women may not get proper education as contrast to men. So why Richard is called SISSY, as I mentioned earlier? Before that, what is SISSY? SISSY is a person regarded as effeminate, macam perempuan. You see that? Effeminate, the word feminine there, right? So as effeminate or cowardly, pengecut. Right? So why Richard is called SISSY? Because in the novel, we can see that Richard hates violence. And as an example, he did not want to kill the bug. He doesn't like blood. He prefers to be at peace, tenang, aman, damai, not causing problems, right? So in early 1900, hating violence is considered not manly because men were supposed to be manly. They were supposed to love violence. Because back then in early 1900, when two men dispute about something, bila mereka dua lelaki tak puas hati tentang sesuatu, they will get into fist fight. They will bertumbuk to solve the problem. But nowadays, we don't do that anymore. We can talk things out. Kita boleh berbincang. Benda boleh bawa berbincang, kenapa nak bawa bertendang kan? Right? So, another reason why Richard was called SISSY because he loves arts. As I mentioned earlier, arts is something fine, something yang halus, yang sepatutnya perempuan yang suka. But Richard is a guy and he does not only love poetry, but he also writes poetry. So, not only he does not like physical activities such as sports or killing bugs, he loves what women were supposed to do. Right? As I said earlier, loving arts means it's for women. So these are the reasons why Richard was called SISSY. Because he was different. Next, the settings can also explain to us about social background of the characters. Right? Latar masyarakat, bagaimanakah masyarakat itu berbeza? Bagaimana karakter di dalam novel berbeza antara satu sama lain? How the characters are different from one another. And in this novel, Dear Mr. Kilmer, the difference is between farmers and merchants. Most people in Turtle Lake are farmers. So who are the merchants? Yes, you got it right. The SCHERMERS. The SCHERMERS were merchants. So in what way are they different? They are different in terms of education, wealth, and other things, which we will look right after this. So the difference, let's see. So for farmers, they usually stayed at one place for generations, right? Meaning dari zaman moyang, datuk, nenek, ayah, anak, cucu, cicit, they stay at one place. So because they stay at one place, they don't move around, they form a very strong community. They have sense of community. They know the people around. And because they know the people around, they have strong community sense like that, they help each other and they believe in each other. And because of that also, they might not trust people from outside. So how about merchants? Merchants might move around a lot. They don't stay in one place. When business is good, they stay. But when business is not good, then they move somewhere else. And because of this, they don't have very strong sense of community. And in Turtle Lake, this is why the SCHERMERS are not very trusted because they are not from there. They are not the Turtle Lake people, or rather what Pa said to Richard. They are not our people, meaning they are not from Turtle Lake. They are from somewhere else. They are strangers. That is the first difference. And then farmers are usually not very well educated. I think you can look around. If you come from, from kampong areas, rural areas, maybe you have, you are from the family of rubber tappers, or, pekebun-pekebun kecil or something like that. You can look at maybe your parents or your friends' parents. If they are farmers, they may not receive enough or proper education. Mungkin ada yang berhenti belajar semasa sekolah rendah. Mungkin tak habis sampai SPM. Right? So, what's wrong with that? There is nothing wrong with that. They might stop school because they have to support their family. But what happens is when they don't receive enough education, they become easy target for deception, for propaganda, because they were easily deceived and influenced. However, merchants, they usually receive better education, right? And because they receive better education, they are usually more outspoken and opinionated, right? They are not as emotional as farmers because they might understand things, right? And this can be seen in the novel. This can be seen in the novel, especially the part when Pa talks about the SCHERMERS, and when we get to know the SCHERMERS, we can see this very clearly. And the last difference is farmers are usually not rich. I'm not saying that they are poor, but they are not necessarily rich. They may own a land. However, their they depend a lot. They depend a lot on the crops, which are seasonal. So if the produce is good, hasil tanaman pada tahun itu baik, because the weather is good, there were no problems with haiwan-haiwan perosak, with pests, then it may be good for them. But if there were flood, there were other problems, then they might have financial problems. Whereas merchants, they usually own shops or taverns. They sell things. When you have a shop, let's say you have a kedai runcit, people will come to your kedai runcit. No matter how bad the economy is, people still come to you to buy things. And because of that, your economy, your financial is more stable. And all these things makes the SCHERMERS different. Let's see. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, okay, the SCHERMERS are different from the Tertelik people, and we know the first reason for it. Because the SCHERMERS are German Americans. Obviously, bangsa berbeza. They are different in that way. But there are other things that make them different. Okay, so the difference is because the SCHERMERS are merchant. They own a tavern, they came from Milwaukee, they were not from Tertelik. And Terteliks are generally farmers. So these are the things that set the SCHERMERS apart from the Tertelik people. And these are the reasons why the SCHERMERS became a target of prejudice and discrimination. So you should understand this. This is the reasons why the SCHERMERS were being discriminated. Another sad thing that we should know about Dear Mr. Kilmer is that the whole plot happened during World War One. So here is the scenario of World War One. During World War One, there were two powers. The first one is called Allied powers, which are supposed to be, well, the good guys. It is an alliance between France, Britain, and Russia. America remained neutral at first, but later joined the war on April 6, 1917. Okay, you have to remember this. Next, we have the Central Powers, or, the bad guys, the enemies. It is an alliance between Germany and Austria-Hungary. Ottoman Empire, or Empire Osmania, and Bulgaria later joined this alliance. So this is the scenario that you all should already know because you learnt it in history. Dalam sejarah dah belajar kan? So sepatutnya dah tahu dan faham tentang World War One. But why is it important to know this? Let's see. So here is a question for you, my dear viewers. When a country, let's take Malaysia for example, is at war with another country, let's say Indonesia, what normally would happen? 1, 2, 3. That 3 seconds, time's up. Right. The answer is simple. When two countries are at war, let's say football match. It's not a war, but it's a competition. When two countries, Malaysia and Indonesia, they participate in football, what would happen? There will be heated arguments and name callings and, kutuk mengutuk, macam-macam lagi. Itu baru perlawanan bola. Imagine if it's a war, right? So the two countries will hate each other. And when that happens, when a country hates another country, that country hates this country, when you show support to your country by hating your country's enemy, it shows that you are patriotic. It shows your patriotism. Bila kamu benci musuh negara kamu, itu bukti kamu sayang negara kamu. Isn't it? So why is this important? It is because you must remember that in this novel, America was at war with Germany. Remember earlier, I told you that America later joined World War One, and the enemies, or suppose the bad guys, one of them was Germany. So America was at war with Germany. And the SCHERMERS, if you still don't know until now, they are what we call German Americans. German Americans means that they were from Germany but became American citizens. Maksudnya, mereka berbangsa Jerman, asal dari Jerman, tetapi menetap tinggal di Amerika dan menjadi rakyat Amerika. So let's say if you, a Malay for example, and then you were born in Malaysia and then you migrate, you stay in America, you will become Malaysian American. Okay, clear? So the SCHERMERS are German Americans. Even though they are Americans, they are still German. They have German blood in them. And this explains why many Turtle Lake people, which are purely Americans, are prejudiced and discriminate the SCHERMERS. What is prejudice? Prejudice is a strong feeling towards someone or something because of a certain reason. So in this situation, the Turtle Lake people, the strong feelings they have against the SCHERMERS is hatred, kebencian. Why? Because Germany is the enemy, right? Was the enemy to the Americans. So they think that the SCHERMERS are Germans, and thus, therefore, the SCHERMERS are, or rather were, the enemies. That's why they have the prejudice and they discriminate. What is discriminate? Discriminate is diskriminasi in Bahasa Melayu, right? And discriminate means that you treat someone differently because of certain reasons, right? And because they are hated, they were treated differently. Okay, and this is one of the most important themes in this novel. Now that we know and understand about the prejudice and discrimination towards the SCHERMERS, let us now look at this term, the HUNS. This term is very important in this novel. Why? We will see. So, what is the HUNS? In this novel, the HUNS refers to an offensive and rude term used for Germans, right? So this is used to insult, untuk menghina. You know, this is like when you call a an African American, a black person, black or Negro. That is very rude, right? So calling the Germans or the German Americans, like the SCHERMERS, as the HUNS is very rude. It is an offensive and rude term. Okay, it is an insult. However, this actually is a propaganda used heavily by Allied powers during World War I to spread hatred towards Germany. But what is propaganda? Propaganda is information, usually biased and misleading. Okay, tidak tepat tidak tepat dan tidak adil. And it is used to promote political cause or point of view. So when people use propaganda, they have something they want to achieve, right? So for example, propaganda during Japanese occupation. Ingat balik sejarah Malaysia. Okay, Malaysia pernah diduduki oleh tentera Jepun. And how did they do that? How did they occupy Malaysia? When they came to Malaysia, British was in power. Okay, British, orang putih, right? Orang putih was in power. They controlled Malaysia. They took all our wealth. And then these Japanese people, they came, they spread this propaganda. Asia is for Asians. Asia adalah untuk orang Asia. Why are we giving our land to the orang putih? So this caused hatred. This caused anger from the Malaysians towards the British. And because of this, the Malaysians back then, they went against the British, and it made it easier for the Japanese to defeat the British. Right? As I said earlier, it is used to spread hatred towards British and garner support for the Japanese, as I said earlier. So as I said earlier, Han was a propaganda used during World War I by the American or the Allied powers to create, to instill, to spread hatred towards the German. And as I said, because this is a real event, here let's see the posters. So you see, our job is to beat the Han, help hunt the Han. The army needs you, so enlist. So they want people to join the army, and to do that, they need people who hates the enemy. Okay, so that's why it's a propaganda. The Huns was actually a propaganda by the American government, or most probably the Allied powers in general. If Huns actually is an insult, does it actually have any real meaning? It does. In the novel, in chapter 5, page 62, Mr. Higby, the history teacher, described Han as nomadic. Nomadic meaning hidup nomad yang berpindah randah. Okay, nomadic Mongolian horsemen. So rakyat Mongolia yang menaiki kuda, who eventually overran much of Europe. They have nothing to do with present day Germans. So nothing to do with the Germans at all. So why are they using the Huns? Well, people back then did not have source of information, reliable information, and they were easily deceived. And remember earlier I told you about the background of Tertelik people. They were farmers. They lacked education. They were easily influenced. So whatever the government told them, they will believe the government. So the real Huns, let's see. Yeah, this is what a Hun might look like. You see, a horseman, and they are Mongolian. They look a bit like Chinese, right? And probably the most popular Han is this guy, right? Who is this? This is Shan Yu from Mulan. If you have not watched Mulan, go and watch the cartoon one. That's the better version. Don't watch the Disney one. Well, boring. In Dear Mr. Kilmer, we hear about the Liberty Bonds towards the end of the novel. But what is Liberty Bonds? Liberty Bonds is also known as Liberty Loan. In case you do not know, loan means pinjaman, pinjaman wang, right? It is a war bond sold in the United States to support the Allied cause in World War I. So what does this mean? Well, why don't we look at some visuals that might help you? Let's see. To understand war bond, let's look at a mobile game called Clash of Clans. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, right? It brings back a lot of memories, huh? Right. So in Clash of Clans, what you do is you clash with other clans. Basically, you go at war with other clans. And what do you do to do that? To clash or to, be at war with other. Okay, let's say this is the enemy's base. This is the enemy, and you want to attack this enemy. What do you do? Right? Yes, you need to prepare your troops of army. But how are you able to prepare troops of army? In this game, what you need to? Yes, you need mana and also gold. These are what we call resources. Meaning you cannot attack the enemy just like that. You need resources. And in real life, resources means money. You need money to get food. You need money to get weapons. You need money to prepare everything for the troops, for the soldiers. So how do the government gets money? How do the American government get money? The government, our government does not have that much money. So how do they get the money? They borrow the money from their citizen. Okay, they borrow their money from the citizen. But how? Before we proceed, let's take a look at Malaysia. Just last year, or was it 2018? I forgot. But just recently, when our government was Pakatan Harapan, we were told that our country has a big debt, right? Hutang negara yang berbilion ringgit. So to help the country, to help the government, to help the country, our government launched what we call Tabung Harapan. So basically to get money from the citizens of Malaysia. So that one is sumbangan, donation. However, in the case of Liberty bonds, in the case of World War One, you don't simply get money just like that from the citizens. So this is what the American government did. Okay, what they did was they sold war bonds to the citizens. What is war bond? War bond is an investment. Investment means pelaburan. Okay, an investment. Pelaburan, what is pelaburan? Pelaburan basically you give money to someone or an organization for a certain period of time, and then they promise that they will return to you with profit. You will get more than what you give. Okay, so here it is an investment for a certain period of time, usually 10 years, wherein the purchaser, the person who buys the investment, will be paid back a larger amount due to interest. For example, the bond is $10, and after 10 years, you will be paid back $400. This is just an example. But normally, war bonds, you don't get that much interest. Actually, it's something, you lose more money rather than getting more money. It's not that profitable. Tak menguntungkan sangat pun. But why is it important? Okay, subscribing to the bonds became a symbol of patriotic duty in the United States. Just like our Tabung Harapan. Back then, whoever donated to Tabung Harapan was considered patriotic. Sayangkan negara. Because negara sedang berhutang, jadi kita bagi sumbangan kepada negara, kita sayang negara. So in this case, the government needs money. When you buy the war bond, if you are an American citizen, and then you buy these war bonds, these liberty bonds, then it shows that you are patriotic. Okay? If you buy the liberty bonds, it shows that you are patriotic. In case when patriotism comes into play, right? Let's say your friends all buy liberty bonds. You are the only one who doesn't buy. What will people say? You are not patriotic. So it stresses you out. It pressures you into buying it. So this is a good strategy by the American government. So this can also be considered as a propaganda, right? This is for the benefit of the government. These are the posters, the evidence that Liberty bonds was once important during World War One. You see, if you can't enlist meaning join the army, tak boleh join army, what do? You invest by buying a Liberty bond. So defend your country with your dollars. So use your money to protect your country. See, this is a propaganda, right? You cannot fight, then you give your money to help the country fight the enemy. And then remember your first thrill of American liberty, your duty by United States government bonds. And then the last one is the bond itself, right? Surat Perjanjian, Liberty bonds. So we're coming to the end of our video. So what's next? Well, I have been planning a few things. I have some ideas in mind. And I thought that I might come up with Dear Mr. Kilmer chapter summary. We'll see how it goes. I have everything in my head, but not on the slides yet. And then someone requested me to, share tips and secrets for MCQ, multiple choice questions. Section A, paper 2. So what do you think? Do you have any other suggestions about videos that I should make? If you have, please drop in the comment below. Let me know what do you like me to share next. So that's all, folks. So all the best for your SPM. As usual, bye.